One of the most unique places in South America, and in fact the world, are the Galapagos Islands, almost 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador.
You might have heard of the Galapagos Islands. It was the unique species here that inspired Charles Darwin's theories of natural selection and evolution.
Today, tourists flock to this archipelago to take in the sun, the sand, and of course the animals. But many native Galapagos see reason to protect as well as to enjoy the island's incredible beauty and wildlife.
Nature has inspired certain individuals here to move away from conventional sources of energy to alternative sources of energy. Hi, I'm Justin.
And I'm Lauren. We're filmmakers interested in the health of our environment, so we're traveling the globe to see how the rest of the world is
Fueled by nature.
But
beyond the views, these islands are special because people are being inspired to find alternative sources of energy.
In this episode of Fueled by Nature, we're in the Galapagos Islands.
And we're going to see how wind and solar energy are beginning to replace conventional sources of energy.
We'll visit a wind farm that powers nearly 40% of one of the islands. And we'll visit the Charles Darwin Research Station and local schools to see how scientists and students are learning to harness the power of the equatorial sun.
We're also going to visit a local passive solar home. And as we travel, we're going to ask you to calculate our carbon footprint.
So come and join us on our expedition of the Galapagos Islands. Wow, it is really hot here in the Galapagos. Don't forget, we're on the equator and it's just about noon, so the sun is directly above us right now. We're here waiting for Roz Cameron. We hear she has a passive solar house that she'd like to show us. I think that's her now. Is that her?
Oh yeah.
Hey Roz, how's it going?
Hi guys. Whoa.
Environmentally friendly all the way, huh? Even on a bike.
Oh yeah. Hi,
so
welcome.
Is this your house?
This is my little touch of paradise in paradise.
Oh,
Yep.
fantastic.
Well, thanks for coming to meet with us.
My pleasure. Well, come on in. Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
breeze.
Oh my gosh, it is so different in here from out there.
Yeah, I would say it's at least 4 degrees cooler.
Most
just walking
definitely.
in the door.
And I got to take my sunglasses off because there was some shade finally.
Yeah, it can actually get too shady here sometimes, but you know, too much shade I'd rather have than boiling to death.
Yeah, and these flowers are absolutely beautiful.
What are they?
They're a combination of endemic plants and hard to kill introduced plants. None of them are invasive, so I feel okay about having, you know, the hibiscus. It's a combination of what survives, obviously the plants from here, and the pretty ones with the pretty flowers just to decorate the place a little bit.
Wow, and that breeze feels incredible. This must make living really, really comfortable here on the island.
It's certainly nice to come home. I try not to go out too much other than to work and to play at night, but during the day this is where I much prefer to be.
It's your own little paradise.
My own little paradise, yeah.
I hear this is a passive solar house. Now I understand what solar panels do, but what exactly is a passive solar house?
As I understand it, my interpretation is that you design the house, you position it, you build it of certain materials in order to reduce the impact of the house heating up. And then using certain materials, you can actually moderate the temperature of a house so that it's a comfortable, I don't know, 23 degrees all year round. What would that be, about 75?
In Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Celsius and Fahrenheit.
Yeah, yeah. But that it's a comfortable living temperature all year round. I haven't quite mastered that, but the principles are here. This is the western side, and so the whole western side of my house, even before I put the little suite upstairs, was shaded by this large fernery area. Mm-hmm. And so there was nothing to heat up the stone walls in the afternoon because they were under shade. And so there was no heat to be trapped, stored and released during the day or during the night. On a very hot, because we have 2 or 3 months here that are very hot, I actually hose this area down because again it's under shade, and so what you get is the cooling effect of the plants, and then that's multiplied by blowing, any breeze that comes in blows over actually wet stones, wet gravel, and reduces it even more.
Wow, so I bet that really cuts down on your energy costs.
My son and I, in our little part of the house, use virtually no energy other than what is obligatory for a teenage boy. Xbox, TV, refrigerator. we're a fairly minimalist family anyway. You don't need very much on Galapagos, and so in that sense, but it's gravity-fed water. We collect our own rainwater for drinking, and just the design of the house. I mean, a fan to circulate air is about the extent of our electrical needs. Yeah.
So what else makes this house environmentally friendly?
What makes it environmentally friendly? Personal ethics. For example, these trees here are an endangered species in Galapagos that can only be collected under a special permit. And I had to wait 8 months, and I paid a lot more money than I know a lot of other people are paying to make sure that it came with the certification from the national park that it was collected legally. And so the difference for me is obviously my house is that kind of rustic look to it. I'm not a cement box person. And so these are some of the strongest timber in the world and are great for creating supports. So in order to do that, I could have bought them cheaply from the guy who sells them illegally, but personal ethics, I think, is a big difference between what I'm doing here, because it's not even an economic decision in many cases. It's about how can I live in a house working for conservation, loving and living in Galapagos, and buy illegal timber. I can't do it. So personal ethics, I think, is a big part in that, and that is the decision for any house design, is sometimes you have to adjust to your own limitations, but you can still have a beautiful house, still be green. Yeah.
So you're saying that your house inside is just like any other person's comfortable living environment, right?
I don't know about any other person's, but again, I use the materials that are available. When I tried to disturb as little of the lava rock, this is a big lava flow, this here. I tried to disturb as little as possible, and what I had to disturb, I recycled as walls. And so a lot of the stone is actually from the property. And I wanted that look anyway. Because this was never planned to be the house here, some of my internal walls are actually big rocks jutting out everywhere. That wasn't planned that way, but now I have somewhere to put my cup of tea or whatever else, because I have all these ledges in the wall that weren't planned. Recycled materials wherever possible. Well, you can kind of see, I've got bits and pieces all around here that have come from somewhere.
Well, your house sounds really neat, and I really love to see some of those rocks jutting out. Can you show us?
Come on in.
Awesome.
So this is actually the house.
Oh, wow.
It's our own little attempt to beautify the world. I live with a very talented artist. In fact, a very talented everything, because even as we enter his stage one of how to recycle, you can actually have a look here. This is what the floor used to look like. And this was recovered from a truckload of hardwood timber. This is 30 years, been laid for 30 years. It's been waxed every week for 30 years. And it took us about 4 days to lay the whole floor, but a month to clean it, literally hand scraping. But at the end of the day, I have about 80 square meters of 30-year-old hardwood parquet that basically for free, for your own effort, and that was...
And it's beautiful.
And it's beautiful. These were, as I was kind of saying before, this was never intended to be an internal wall. This was going to be just the play area, the laundry. And so I've got all these kind of, a bit of a dust catcher, but every now and again I get through, but it's an interesting effect as well, because
it really is.
You wouldn't normally have that sort of rock in, and even here it's
even cool too, so I'm guessing it helps keep the house pretty cool.
It's cool to touch. The lava rocks are great because if you don't put them in the sun, they don't heat up, so they stay cool. High ceilings also, absolute must for keeping a house cool, and you'll see that it's still just chicken wire, but one day the most I would ever put up there would be mosquito netting, because that's actually the airflow. Heat rises, so any circulation of heat is in that first metre or so, and even though it's an aluminium roof, just putting that layer of timber underneath, or in Australia or the US you'd probably use fiberglass insulation or whatever the latest thing is. Here, timber is cheap, so I've lined it with timber, and so any heat stays about 3 metres up, so it doesn't come down on you. And anything that's there gets blown, it's at both ends, any breeze goes straight through.
Now I see you have a cat over here. one thing I've heard about green living in the Galapagos is that cats and dogs are invasive species. So if you're trying to live a green lifestyle, why would you have a cat?
Good question. One, it's partly due to the fact that my work keeps me away a lot and my child is home alone a lot. It's very safe here, so it's okay to leave a child in the house by himself, but he got very lonely. So when a young pregnant female showed up here and gave birth to the kittens in this house, it was my son who took care of them for about a month and then convinced me that we could have an eco-friendly cat. Everybody laughs when I say that, but he was trained for a year the way I've always trained my dogs and my animals. From when he was tiny, if he even looked at a bird, he'd be squirted with the water pistol. If he caught anything, he would be made wet. I wouldn't dip him in the bucket, but you know, I'd put him under the tap and tell him in my gruff school teacher's voice what a naughty boy he was. Whereas if he brought in a mouse, he would be the most fabulous animal in the world, and he would be patted and he'd be given treats and told how wonderful he was. And so it was the domestication process that we take for granted, because we're usually getting domestic animals that through generations and generations have been bred to behave in a certain way. Whereas I had to take that to the nth degree so that he wouldn't chase the lizards and the birds. And the mistakes he made in the first couple of years while he was learning were minimal, but I can't remember the last time I saw him with a lizard or a bird. So it's about understanding animal behavior and working out how to adjust their behavior to be able to exist here, and that I feel comfortable owning an animal that is traditionally famous for being a very nasty predator of birds in particular, and making him low impact.
So Roz, what is this last deck?
This last deck is for those dark days that actually just enable me to sit out here on a much sunnier side. But by about, I'm usually here about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon or after work. This is where I'll come around about 5 o'clock, because the translucent roof gives enough shade to not heat up the wall. It protects it from the rain. But the sun sets just kind of immediately over there, and so this whole backyard turns pink and orange and beautiful colours in the afternoon. And so there's no big solid roof above me. You can see the moon, the full moon through this, and so this is kind of like the flip side of the sunroom, which is more a little living space. This is the gardens are still, well, I'm still building, but like this is the space where we'd be having brunch out here. We're at the back of the house, and there's as much breeze, if not more, right here. And I'm actually thankful to my neighbours who built an 8-metre high monstrosity of cement blocks behind me, because even though there used to be a lot of breeze, it seems that the breeze now comes through, hits that wall and bounces back into the house. So this is, it's like this all day with a nice breeze around.
So how important is it to put certain items on each side of the house? Because each part of your house looks very different, from the garden to the open windows to this where there's a big wall.
It all depends on what you plan to use it for. The fernery was designed to shade the western side, and I will actually extend that further down to the western side as when I finish building. It's simply to keep the house cool and have a nice place to be, and so that is a component of the house to help it function. The sunroom is to have a nice place to be in when it's a dark day, but you still need to be inside, and you can be part, you have the garden right there in front of you. So you're sitting in the garden, but you're still in a room. Whereas out the back here, this is obviously going to be much more where, you know, have your barbecues and your parties and whatever else is going to happen. Mason and his mates and his tree house would tend to be focused here. It's a bigger space, and so this is more designed less for protecting the house than it is for having an extension of the house to be able to play in. The Charles Darwin Foundation has had a native garden program going for a couple of years now too, and so people are actually getting aware that you can have a house like mine, and it's being encouraged, whereas before, certainly people coming from mainland Ecuador, there's very little space. You park your car in it, you don't plant a tree in it, and you cement it over because that's easier to hose off and keep clean. That probably happens everywhere else as well, but certainly coming from a land where there was a lot of space, gardens have been part of my culture. And I'm seeing it more and more here, particularly with the Native Garden Project, where it might just be a couple of cactuses or one of the mayuyu trees that's very quick growing, but people are thinking about their gardens now where they didn't a few years ago.
Well, Roz, thank you so much for taking the time to show us your passive solar house. I've definitely learned a lot about green construction and green living today.
Well, it just goes to show it can be done.
Absolutely, and it can be done pretty easily too.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's less damage to the pocket, less damage to the planet, and you get to live in a beautiful place.
And it's nice and cool, unlike out there, which is pretty hot, but I think we're gonna have to brave it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I
My
definitely
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you. You've definitely made me a believer.
All right, Justin,
All
are you
right.
ready to go face that heat?
Not ready. But
Well, I think
let's
we've got
go.
to, so let's go.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Roz.
Bye.